Patricia Allingham Carlson, and this is my painting of a painted lady butterfly. You know, it's funny, we all face it as artists sometimes, that white paper syndrome, where you just stare at the white paper and think, ugh, what am I going to put on this? Is it going to be any good? Sometimes just putting some random marks on that white paper helps you get some new direction and some new starts. And that's exactly what I did. A friend of mine had sent me a video clip of someone dipping screws and small balls into black ink, dropping them on paper and rolling them around. The results were rather interesting, so I decided to give it a try myself. My results produced a bunch of small circles and random lines, but looking at it, I immediately thought about a painted lady butterfly. And so that's what I proceeded to do. I hope you enjoy my video and give it a thumbs up. Now let's paint. Here we go. I found a collection of small screws and a little ball bearing, and I dropped in some black ink. I squiggled them all around, dropped them on the paper, and rolled it around. It was intriguing, so I did another one since the screws were all still somewhat wet. I decided to work with this one, and once I decided, I saw a butterfly, a painted lady butterfly. I began a drawing. With a basic drawing completed, I came in with some color very lightly and began to paint over the lines to sketch it out. Now I'm not sure why my ink ran and produced that interesting green color, but I decided I liked the color. So I went with the flow. Here I'm using some washed out yellow and yellow ochre to draw in the veins and the structure of the butterfly's wing. The lower wing took the main interest in this particular composition because that's where all the circles were, and that's what actually exists on one of these butterflies. The top wing has the beautiful, brilliant red colors. So I wanted to make sure I got some of that in there. I proceed to continue detailing with a small brush, sketching in instead of using all pencil lines, with paint, to mark for myself where I want to paint. I am looking at a photographic reference image while I'm working, so I can try to get the anatomy somewhat correct and the markings. Although with this particular beginning, I went way off with some of the markings because I got what was actually created by screws instead of nature. But I decided abstract and interpretive were just fine. Many of the veins on this butterfly's wings were white. It would have been easier if they were all black, but they weren't. So I had to paint around the white lines that I wanted to retain for the veins of the wings. I could have used masking, but this was sort of an experiment, and I was just trying to have some fun and try something new and see what I came up with, because I really do like trying new things. After I painted in the sketches for the basic markings, I began to paint in and block in the color areas. I am planning to glaze and make the colors brighter, particularly on the warm reds and peach and coral colors. The way I'm breaking up the colors is my own interpretation. It's not actually how the wings look. But this is my experiment, so I could do whatever I want, right? Now I'm working with a cobalt blue. The red colors were done with cadmium red, vermilion, and permanent rose. A little bit of cadmium yellow was used as well. I'm using burnt sienna for this particular circle. And that's a nice orangey brown. And I think I end up putting some vermilion in it to tie it into the top. So the colors will pair up a little bit. Next, I mixed up some yellow ochre and painted in all the sections that I saw that looked yellow ochre to me. As I'm working, I'm also reinforcing some of the lines where it's very dark. Those dark lines really set off the bright colors. For my darks, I'm either using the ink that's already down or I'm mixing my black. And my black I use purple, sepia, and indigo for. Where the butterfly is more brown, I'm using Van Dyke brown and sepia. Aren't these markings pretty? Have you ever looked closely at a butterfly's wings? The markings are fascinating. I think they all evolved as some form of camouflage, so the butterfly will blend in with its background surroundings. But when you get those brilliant colors on it, you have to wonder, because that's not going to blend in. I guess that's just to attract other butterflies of its species. But they sure are pretty. I'm outlining my cobalt blue parts of the wing with a deeper blue, adding some French ultramarine, and continuing with my yellow ochre. Adding accents as I go with my sepia and my black mix. And I'm just going through the butterfly and filling in piece by piece. And using my imagination as well, since I had such a random beginning. This butterfly also had some stripes on it. The stripes do not go straight across. They go in a zigzag type of formation following the vein layout. And that's what I see as I look closely at my reference. One line I don't quite know what to do with, that was formed by a ball rolling off the paper, is the one on the left going right through the middle. So as I paint, I think to myself, well, I guess at some point I'll figure that one out, because I'm not getting rid of it. That's black ink and that's not moving. But it begins to matter a little less as I put on other darks in the painting. I really like this one section of the wing with all these little stripes. I'm using my black mix and I'm also using a little bit of blue to soften it and blur out. It's not pure white, but it's a real nice pattern, and I think it's real striking looking. The border of this butterfly is white, so I'm making sure I mark where that is white so I don't paint over it later. And I continue working around the butterfly, different areas of the wing, and filling in piece by piece, trying to retain the white veins between the areas of the wings. Trying to remember to. When I forget, sometimes I can take the color off and remove it a little bit with a damp brush and a paper towel. Now I'm working with some of the circles because they're so striking in the butterfly. I'm trying to make them look very striking on my paper. Some of the areas of these circles have iridescence to them, so they shine in different colors. They can appear very dark or they can appear almost turquoise or indigo, even with some purple glints because of the iridescence of the color scales that make up the wings. There are some areas that are very neutral colored on the wings. I generally like to mix up my gray coloring with a little bit of any kind of brown and a little bit of any kind of blue, although not a turquoise blue. Indigo, cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, and brown tend to neutralize each other and make a nice gray. For the tan coloring, I'm using a lot of yellow ochre. I'm also using some raw sienna and some burnt umber. So I'm blocking in all the different small color areas and the neutrals. And what I'll have to do with each of these small areas, if I want to really make them pop, is go back and look at my reference photo and see how they're edged and tipped and have subtle gradations with darker colors, with dots, with borders, with different aspects. And make sure that I include those little speckles and borders and dots. But for now, I still have lots to fill in, and that's what I'm doing. I brought up another reference photo and saw that some of the iridescence gave a turquoise coloration. And I decided that would be a good fit for my butterfly because of all the vermilion and orangey red. I also brought in some purple by adding a little bit of quin magenta to the turquoise and to the cobalt blue. So I'm working with colors that are actually something I see in reality, looking at reference photos, but using my imagination to make them a little brighter in some cases than they actually are. I'm also combining many different pictures and adding what I think looks good. And I continue to fill in small sections and go back and glaze and layer more color onto some areas that have already been painted. In some cases, I don't know what color to put down, so I just make a guess. A neutral is always safe. I was looking at this painting at this point and thinking, well, it's all getting filled in, but it doesn't quite look like it's formed or pulled together. But as I worked, I realized I needed to pull it together by accenting some of the veins on the wings. Even though they were white, they needed to have some outlining. So I did put some shading into some of those white veins a little later in the painting. For now, I just continue to fill in. I'm adding dots, borders, and stripes. I'm going back and I've relayered my darker colors. In some cases, I use sepia. In some cases, I'm using just plain indigo. And in other cases, I'm using my black mix. And I'm liking the definition I'm seeing by adding these good, dark, strong dark accents. The butterfly is beginning to get completely filled. Most of the areas that are still white are because the butterfly is white in those areas. I'm also working into the small patches of browns and grays and adding the dots and details that are in each one of them if you look very closely at the wings. Most of those little patches are not just one color, but some good gradations of color. And here you see I'm beginning to outline some of the whites. And moving to the butterfly's body. I'm sure it's not fur, but it sort of looks like a fur. Butterflies have a very large compound eye. They generally have long antennae, and they generally have a long proboscis which curls down into the flowers that they try to drink nectar from. The body is a little confusing, so I'm just painting what I see. And again, it appears to have very long fur on it. So I'm painting it in lots of little lines. I'm using my gray mixes, and in some cases bringing in some beige colors as well. The definition all appears to be with some accent browns. And there are several legs from this insect showing. I'm blocking in the color areas and then going back and detailing. At some point I decided not to paint the proboscis, the long tongue-like appendage that goes down into the flowers. I couldn't see a way to gracefully include it. So I figured that maybe the butterfly had just retracted it for the moment. A friend of mine suggested I paint the butterfly's eye blue. And you know, that would have been pretty. but I didn't see the suggestion until after the painting was done, so I let it be. And I could have made it a blue eye if I wanted, because you can do whatever you want when you're painting. In this case, the eye, in reality, looked more amber or tan. This is the fine-tuning part. As I get toward the end of my butterfly creation, I'm adding the small details, working with the veins, trying to accent them as well as other dark areas and bring them out a little darker, and working around the painting to pull it together. And the veins begin to stand out more on the wings as I do the accent work. At this point, I'm starting to feel like the wings are about done. Now I'm playing around with color a little bit. And now I'm taking some water and taking that line out there, letting it run in the background. And I'm not sure what I'm doing with the background, but I thought, well, I think a nice green color would look natural and would play off the reds in the wings. So I'll mix up some shades of green and play around with some circular forms and some arches. I'll approach my background almost like a soft geometry because of that line going across. So I'm working wet. I'm adding a little yellow to my greens. I'm adding a little turquoise to my greens. And I'm adding some Payne's Gray to tone it down a bit. I think a little lime green might be nice. So I'm bringing in some good strong cadmium yellow. And I'm continuing that circular arch type of feeling in some areas. What I decided to do was go back up to the arches and the circles on the wings and see if some of them would extend outward and take it into the background. And that's what you see me finding as I'm making these lines. I sort of liked how that random edge just came out on the lower right, so I left it. And I've painted around a white circle on the top left. And there's another wing arch, extended outward. Now I'm going back and darkening and adding some more arches. I take that one arch right up into the wing. And I've got to remind myself, keep that white on the border of the wing. A couple times I forgot, and I did have to blot it out. Where I found that the bottom of the butterfly's head was not standing out enough, I added some darker green. I actually mixed in a little hooker's green dark. And here's some more cadmium yellow on top of my green to make that lime color. I find an arch to extend outward to incorporate my top left sphere. That chops it off and makes it no longer spherical. But I figured that was a better solution than just a random sphere there. I tied it to the butterfly's wing and where it might logically sphere out or line out into the background. I'm evaluating at this point. I'm deciding the left needs a little bit more work. So I find another sphere. Just an arch actually extending outward from the wing. I just marked where my antenna will be, and I've decided to paint them after I have the background done. This is softening the edges of the top white sphere with some damp brush blending. And then adding those two antennae. Each of the antennae are topped by a small sphere. So I'm gently adding some shading to the top of them. It's done, and I'm signing my name. I hope you enjoyed watching my video of Painted Lady Butterfly. I hope you give it a thumbs up and subscribe. And if you ring the bell below in the links, you won't miss a single video in the future. I also have some links to products that I use to create my art, and you can find them, as well as links to my Facebook art page and my blog, as well as my products page, where I sell my own prints and derivatives of my artwork. I welcome your comments, and I'll see you next video.